Welcome everybody into another edition of the Big Ten Show. Bleav in the Big Ten here on the Bleav Podcast Network, also Sirius XM Radio, soon to be Bally. We're growing. We're going to be every freaking where pretty soon. Hopefully, at least that's the idea. I am Adam Carricker. He is Rhett Lewis. How you doing today, my friend?
Yeah, what's up, Adam? Great to be here, and great to be here with our friends on Sirius XM Big Ten Radio, and excited to share this journey with you guys. I get to hang out with my friends on Big Ten Radio a couple of times during the week, and excited to add this piece to the content puzzle as well. So thanks to our friends at Sirius and Big Ten Radio for joining the party here, and excited to kick that partnership off and continue to find more ways to engage our Big Ten friends.
Absolutely, and we've got a great show today. We're going to take a brief look. We've talked about the top 25 in the past. Yeah. We've talked about the power rankings for the Big Ten, but the AP poll officially recently just came out with their preseason top 25 rankings. So we're going to chat about that briefly. We're also going to dive into USC and UCLA.
West Coast.
It's still weird for me to say this. Big Ten teams, because we're a Big Ten show. We're going to talk about Big Ten teams, even though they're way out in California. So we're going to talk about USC and UCLA today. But real quick, as you look at this preseason AP poll, all right, what sticks out to you? Is there anybody who was left off? Is there anybody who's way too high, who's overrated? What are your thoughts?
No, I kind of broke it down, and almost piggybacking off of our conversation a couple of weeks ago when we, pitted the two conferences against each other, Big Ten and SEC. And I was just kind of looking at this as, hey, the AP sees it, the AP voters see it as, the Big Ten with two of the top three ranked schools. Now, obviously, Georgia gets the top nod as the number one team. So SEC is on top of the poll, but you've got Ohio State and Oregon right there, claiming two spots in the top three. And then when you factor it out, when you look through the top 10, you take Notre Dame out, you take Florida State out, it's dead even. Big Ten and SEC, each with four teams in the top 10. So I see this as, a pretty good power share at the top, and then overall some pretty good equity in terms of marquee teams that you're going to see fighting for a playoff spot come December.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of issues with the preseason poll. The preseason polls, people have debated over the year. Should we even do them? Yes or no? How much do they matter? Then you look at the end of the year and all these teams that were like in the top 15 aren't even freaking ranked. And it's fun. It's fun. Yes, we should do them because it's fun. Do they mean a lot? No. But that's not the point. The point is they're fun. It gives us stuff to talk about. And when you see a number next to a team, I just envision the video game, all right, that my son's playing like nonstop all the time right now. When you see a number next to a team, it just makes it a little bit more exciting. Nothing egregious sticks out to me. My only thought is I do think that Oklahoma State's going to surprise some people. They have a lot of people coming back. They have a very generous schedule there in the Big 12. Best running back in the entire country coming back, basically almost their pretty much entire offense. I think Florida State's going to surprise some people in a not great way. I think they have a lot of talent. I think they have a lot of people to replace. And I actually think Miami's going to be the team that comes out of the ACC and gets a top 4 seed in the playoff. But, that we're not doing bold prediction takes. Those are just kind of my early on thoughts as we head into this college football season.
Yeah. And then, the way that I kind of broke it up is, top 10, next 10, and then the final 5. And when you go through the next 10, SEC's got some real depth there, right? Missouri, LSU, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Texas A&M. And then, as you mentioned, that's where you get some of those ACC teams and Big 12 teams jumping in there as well. But, Big 10 doesn't come back outside of the top 10, outside of number 9, Michigan. Big 10 doesn't come back into the poll until USC and Iowa at 23 and 25. I actually think, that might be a little high for those two teams. And look, I'm happy that they're in there. And look, again, it means nothing at this point. But I think you could put any number of 15 different teams in that kind of final 5, right? 21 through 25, and put them all in a bag, shake it up, and throw it in there, and you could get, however many different combinations you could get is how many different teams will have a shot at being in that range, through the first couple of weeks of the season. I mean, the Iowa thing, and we don't have to go in depth on this yet because we'll get to their summer season series preview here in a little bit, but Iowa has got quarterback issues. And for a team to be in the top 25 with major quarterback issues, if you've seen Cade McNamara's, summer scrimmage performance, some of the videos are out there. Kirk Ferentz talking about how, that's kind of been what it's looked like all summer. And you're like, whoa, this is an issue. You're counting on this guy to be one of the top half quarterbacks in the Big Ten, and he's got some real problems right now. So hopefully they can shake that off and figure it out. Obviously, defense and special teams always going to carry Iowa and probably will again. So those are just my thoughts on those final 2 Big Ten teams there. And then we'll get in more in depth on USC here as we get to their portion of the summer series later in the show.
For sure. With Iowa, they were dead last in the country in offense, and they still won 10 games. They're just a team that wins with defense and special teams, and they're not going to beat themselves. They're not going to commit penalties. They're not going to turn the ball over. They're used to not having good offensive play. They don't have a brutal schedule in the Big Ten. They could very well end up 8, 9, 10 wins again, and maybe have the least productive offense in the Big Ten conference. I don't know about the country again, and it wouldn't shock me. We'll get into USC here in a moment. USC is one of those unpredictable teams. I flat out don't know what to expect out of USC this year. If there were a team that Nebraska's a team that's starting to gain momentum as far as being in these preseason polls. I don't know that anything has been earned at this point. Kool-Aid in the offseason is fun, it's flowing, it tastes great. If you put them in, great. If somebody doesn't put them in the preseason top 25, that's fine. Make them earn it. I look at Rutgers, a team with the second most amount of returning production in the entire Big Ten, a team that does not have to play Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, Iowa. Basically I mean, they're going to be a good team, a physical team, a smash mouth team, and they do not have a tough schedule. I actually predict Rutgers will be in the top 25 at the end of the season, just due to everything that I kind of mentioned.
Yeah, cool. Well, with that, you want to jump into the summer series then? You want to get into the SC and UCLA previews?
Yeah, dude, let's light this candle. Why don't you kick it off with the Trojans?
Sure. Yeah, so look, just set the scene quickly on USC. Obviously, 8-5 record last year, and Caleb Williams' last year for the Trojans playing quarterback before he went on to become the #1 overall pick of the Chicago Bears. So obviously, you've got a gigantic hole there to replace. But when you think about how this USC team finished, a ton of guys didn't end up playing in the bowl game, but they went out there and dominated, especially offensively. Miller Moss setting USC program records for his performance in that bowl game. And now Miller Moss is the guy at quarterback. So I think if we start with star power, which is what we do when we're looking at these teams, you have to put Miller Moss up there. Now, has he established himself as a true star? No. And I think that's kind of going to be my theme here with SC and UCLA. It's like they've showed you that they have what it takes to be a star. Now you just have to see it consistently. Right. We've seen star-like qualities from players like this, and Miller Moss certainly fits that category for me. So Miller Moss is definitely one of those stars to me. I think, the way that that I kind of look at this, I'm going to have more breakout players for SC than I am star power, and probably same for UCLA here. So when I flip the script and go to the defensive side of the ball in terms of star power, Kamari Ramsey at safety, I think, is an absolute star. I think he comes over from UCLA with his defensive coordinator, Danton Lynn. I think he's really good in the spring. I think he's just an absolute stud, controlling the defense from the back end there. So I think that's definitely one of them. And then Bear Alexander is going to be is a star power up in the front. Not the biggest, right, defensive, lineman. I think a lot of times when you're thinking about guys that dominate up front, you think kind of big, huge freight. He's not that type of guy, but man, he can really penetrate. He can really, stack shed, get out of the way, get offensive linemen out of his way, get into the backfield and cause some real havoc there. So that's where I'm going star power right now. Miller Moss, Kamari Ramsey, and I'm going with Bear Alexander as well. What do you got?
Yeah, I got a lot of crossover, honestly, a couple of maybe variations, if you will. I got Miller Moss, okay, and you mentioned it. He's kind of waited 3 years for this. I find myself just rooting for him.
I love it.
It was 42-28 versus Louisville, who was in the ACC championship game, okay, and it really wasn't that close in the Holiday Bowl. It didn't feel like the game was that close when they beat him in the Holiday Bowl. He completed 70% of his passes, 6 touchdown passes, threw for 372 yards, and looked just like every other quarterback who's ever played in the frickin' Lincoln Riley offense. I mean, it's just like plug and frickin' play, it seems. We'll see what happens beyond just one game. I don't want to say just one game, but beyond one game. And so Miller Moss is there. Now, we do got to keep in mind, it is kind of a foregone conclusion in people's minds, but USC had a quarterback transfer in from UNLV who people thought was going to go to Georgia, actually committed to Georgia, then flipped to USC, and he plans on challenging for the job. Jaden Maeve. Did I say that right? There's some names I had to practice today. Say it again.
Maeve.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm going to be honest with UCLA. You might have to help me out. I legit looked up pronunciations and I practiced, and I hope I do these guys justice because I want to give them the best respect I can. So if I mispronounce, I'm just going to apologize in advance. But this is a guy who's flat out said he plans on coming in and, challenging and competing for this starting job. Another guy that you might think about is Jonah Monheim. Okay. And this is a guy who has started a bunch of games, started multiple years, offensive lineman for the Trojans. And, if USC is going to be successful, it's no different whether you're in Southern California or if you're in Madison, Wisconsin. It all starts up front. And if we're talking star power, I mean, you went to Tony White last week for Nebraska. You got to go to Lincoln Riley. Okay, you talk about star power. It's Lincoln Riley, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Caleb Williams, Heisman trophies, #1 overall draft picks, and people just take it for granted in his offenses. So for me, the biggest star is probably Lincoln Riley, but let's get to that breakout players list.
Yeah, and I'll just throw, because I was at USC practice yesterday, so I actually had a chance to watch start to finish everything that they had going on. Yeah, Monheim, that starting center for USC, definitely up there. By the way, keep an eye on Elijah Page. It won't be hard. 6'7", 320-pound left tackle out there for Lincoln Riley. So they are looking like overall top to bottom within each position group. Man, it looks like SC
looks better.
Back. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. Okay, yeah. So we'll get to breakout players here, and I got a couple of them. Won't go too in depth on all of them, just because I want to make sure we get to all of the different avenues here that we want to dissect this team with. But I'm going to start with Woody Marks, who comes in from Mississippi State, transferring in as the running back. I saw it in the spring game. I was there at the Coliseum watching it, and he was the star on offense in that game, in my opinion. In a game in which they turned the ball over 5 times. So I don't believe any of them were because we're from Woody. So Woody, I think, has an opportunity here. And I think a lot of times the running back gets lost in a Lincoln Riley offense a little bit. But we think about what Marshawn Lloyd did last year at USC. I think Woody Marks can do that and more. I think he's got great power and contact balance too, and some real good vision through the hole. So I'm excited about what he can do there. Another one that could be breaking out here, in my opinion, and again, as we look at this, these are names. If you follow USC, you're going to know these names, but we just haven't seen like that major production yet. So let's talk about Deuce Robinson, 6'6", 220 pounds. I saw this dude running with the 1s and the 2s. Like, he wanted all the reps, and they were willing to give him all the reps to continue to kind of refine his game. He's got such a great catch radius, physical player, some real good speed. Like to see a little bit more refinement in and out of his breaks, but I think Deuce Robinson, this wide receiver core in particular. Oh, by the way, I have this marked here, and I totally loved it. Zachariah Branch is a star.
Yep.
Number one, 5'10", 175 pounds. The wide receiver return specialist. He's a star. That 100% should have been in my star power. I missed that one. Okay, so Deuce Robinson from the wide receiver group. Here's another name that really kind of popped to me while watching practice that I'm going to keep a closer eye on. Charles Ross, redshirt senior, transfer from San Jose State. I gave him a couple of pluses on my little grading system watching practice. Compete level with the ball in the air, contested catches. I'm going to keep an eye on Charles Ross, what he can do for the Trojans this year on offense. So, and then I mentioned number 72 left tackle. A lot of fun watching Elijah Page move around with his frame. So keeping an eye there. And then, yeah, that does it for me on the offensive side of the ball. I'll give you the defensive side, guys, here. Mason Cobb transfer in from Oklahoma State, and then Easton Mascarenas Arnold, I think, coming in from Oregon State. the linebackers are going to be fun to watch here. So those guys, I think, could be real breakout stars. And then keep your eye on number 18, Eric Gentry, senior, 6'6", 215 pounds. By far the most explosive linebacker they have. Definitely the thinnest frame at linebacker they have. I'll be curious to see how Danton Lynn uses him. I think if he gets used in the right way and puts in some positions to succeed, has the talent to really break out. And then DeCarlos Nicholson, speaking of breaking out, he's got the best break on the ball I saw from any DB at USC practice. A couple of times made some breaks on balls that got, was able to get his hand on it, break it up, and then had, I think, what would have been a pick six on a ball in practice yesterday as well. 6'3", 195 pounds, big, long corner. Loved what he brings to the table, transfer from Mississippi State. So I like those guys in terms of breakout potential with the USC Trojans.
That's a great list. And it was interesting as I was kind of coming up with my list, and I'm gonna avoid the names that would be crossover. So I still got a couple names left on my list.
Sure.
I had 10 originally. 6 of them were on defense.
There's a lot, right? I think that's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of talent, a lot of athleticism. So USC was small on defense last year. If you just looked at them, they looked small. So when you start talking about how they look and it looks different, that means something. Okay. And I'll never forget, it was the year that Alabama crushed Notre Dame in the national championship, BCS national championship game, the whole Manti Te'o thing. But Urban Meyer was on the sideline and he was looking at Alabama. And he had just taken over at Ohio State. And he's like, we don't look like that. We need to look like that Alabama team. And then obviously they went on to win a whole lot of games, championships there at Ohio State under Urban Meyer. So USC looking the part shows you the elevation in the type of player that they have. Okay, but of the 10 players I had, 6 were on defense. So that's got to excite Trojans fans. Okay, 60% of the guys I have are listed on defense. All right, and I've got a couple of additional names to your great list. Jalen Smith, all right, defensive back. This is a guy he's an interesting defender heading into 2024. Okay, he was the defensive MVP actually last year. He actually played for the Trojans. He played really well in the Holiday Bowl. Okay, had 12 sacks from the safety position throughout the season as well. He's a versatile guy. He can play nickel. He can play safety. He can be a guy you can move all over the field, like a chess piece, so to speak. Okay, he's generated 123 tackles and 8.5 tackles for loss. Okay, as well. This is a guy to keep your eye on. And then Jamil Muhammad. All right. And by the way, I want to go back to Bear. Okay, Alexander. Just a great name. Just a great name for a defensive player. Just Bear. I just love that. That was all. Yeah. All right, Jamil Muhammad. He impressed in his first year at USC. Okay, having spent the first 3 years of his college career at Georgia State, but the Panthers transfer actually led the Trojans with 6.5 sacks a year ago. So the person who leads the Trojans in sacks this year probably should have more than 6.5 if the defense is going to succeed. But their returning sack leader from a year ago is back. Okay, at 46 tackles, 10.5 tackles for a loss and 2 forced fumbles. So hopefully he can play even better, even more improved than he did a year ago when he led the Trojans in sacks. Now, my biggest question mark, okay, heading into this season, I'm going to shock everybody. Nobody's going to see it coming. Defense. The defense. Yeah. Okay, and I have a feeling yours might be different based on things you've said in previous shows. But until they show me that Lincoln Riley's offense is going to struggle in the game, because I've never seen that, okay, it's going to be defense, because that's where the Trojans have been just awful at all. I've made the bad joke of, do they even do tackling drills in practice, et cetera, just having fun. But new defensive coordinator, Coach Lynn, who they took from their crosstown rival. They're like UCLA, bam, backhand to the face. We're going to take your defensive coordinator. What can he do with the Trojans on defense this year, and how much better can they be?
Yeah, and you know what, Adam, in terms of the biggest question mark, we are aligned, my friend, because, you shouldn't question offensive production on a team coached by Lincoln Riley. Like you should know, right? You've seen it. The body of work is there. It's on the field. It's in the stat sheets. Like the success is there. And yes, I know Miller Moss is still a little bit unproven. We've seen him in essentially one game, and he passed with flying colors in that one game in the Liberty Bowl performance, as we've talked about. But I think they're going to find a way to put points on the board. They're going to find a way to get out there and make big plays, explosive plays, and find ways to move the ball. I'm not worried about it. I'm just not right now. I know Lincoln Riley is that good a coach. He's got a good coaching staff and on that offensive side of the ball as well. So I'm good there. The question for me, and I'll take it one step further for you. It's not how will the USC defense be better this year. It's how much better will they be? Because it is clear that they are already improved from where they were a year ago. And that started when Danton Lynn arrived on campus. Didn't take him long, just had to, the drive was maybe just a different exit than it was anything else. So we saw it in the spring game with the 5 turnovers they forced as the culmination, right? And like, all right, man, we leave the spring on a good note. We go through the summer. We start the fall on a good note. There's playmakers in the secondary. There's playmakers at the linebacker spot. The question I have is at that middle level, right? The linebacker level, can they get out and cover sideline to sideline? We'll see. We'll see if that's where teams decide to try and attack them. And can they get some real pressure on the quarterback, outside of what Bear does up front? We'll see. We'll see on that front. But I think they are going to be so much better that I think this USC team is, we'll get to their win totals here in a second, but I think they're going to be, competing in the Big Ten Conference, right? And they're going to be competing for a good bowl game coming up here. Maybe competing for a spot in the top 12. We shall see on that front. Okay, so that's my biggest question mark. You want to move then to the most intriguing matchup on the schedule for USC. What do you got?
All right, so they're early on because this USC team is just a gigantic question mark as far as how much better they're actually going to be and what's the defense going to look like. Is the defense better to the point where it's just slightly below average? Is it average? Is it actually above average? Is it a defense that maybe gives up some yards and points but can force a ton of turnovers like they did in the spring game against their own offense? Like, what does that defense look like? I mean, I expect Lincoln Riley's offense to be successful because it's Lincoln Riley, but can you go out and do it week in and week out in one of the 2 best conferences in all of college football with a new quarterback? So for me, it's early on. It's right out the gate. And you can pick either of these 2 games. I'll just pick the very first one because it's LSU, who, by the way, plays USC and UCLA this year, which I thought was interesting. But it's LSU. Okay, LSU's got question marks of their own on defense. They scored about 8 billion points last year and gave up about 8 billion points, kind of like USC. So they're both coming in. How good can our offenses be with our former Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks and top overall picks, number 1 and 2 in the draft, both gone? Can we actually play a little bit of defense? So it's actually going to be very similar for both squads coming in. How good can we still be on offense? How much better can we be on defense? So I'm going with USC's first game of the year versus LSU. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'll move a couple of weeks later in the schedule, but I agree with you. That is a huge, test at the beginning of the season. But I think this team might continue to find their stride as the season goes on. So I'm going to look at Michigan on the road September 21st, right? I think Michigan is maybe a little bit inflated as we were relating back to how we started the show with the top 25. There's question marks on that within that program as well there to have them up at number 9. Love to see it, but I don't know if it's validated just yet. And I think this will be a good opportunity for USC to really measure themselves against their tier where I kind of have them in the Big Ten, right? Is that kind of that middle, that second to third tier of team right now in the Big Ten, trying to push forward and rise vertically. So to me, the most intriguing matchup is USC Michigan. Iconic programs, iconic colors, getting a chance to see it in the big house is a Big Ten game. That really, really intrigues me. So with that, let's save the win totals for the end, right? We'll do SC and UCLA win totals at the end, which means we can switch gears here and move to the SC crosstown rival UCLA Bruins, first year under Deshaun Foster after Chip Kelly left to return to the coordinator ranks with the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now they're OC, and that leaves a favorite son there in Westwood to run this program. Has had some ups and downs this offseason. Obviously went viral in the wrong way for his podium address at Big Ten Media Days, as you and I were there. but have moved forward, have kind of embraced that in kind of an ironic way, right? They made the t-shirts that said "We're in LA," which are great.
Got to embrace it, right?
Yeah. And I kind of liked what he did with his coaching staff, brought Eric Bieniemy back as an OC guy with some real NFL chops, and has been at UCLA before. Has coached legends there in the running back room like Maurice Jones-Drew and Deshaun and all that. So I like bringing that band back together. Now let's see what they can do. So I'm going to send it to you. Star power to you right now for the UCLA Bruins.
I think there's going to be a lot of similarity for both of us when it comes to more breakout players, probably than star power, so to speak. Kind of like USC. Star powers that do stick out to me. I mean, I'm going to go with Ethan Gabers at quarterback. Yeah, and he was the MVP of the LA Bowl versus Boise State. Quite an entertaining bowl game to watch, a great bowl win for UCLA at the time. And I know that's weird to say versus a non-power team, but most people view Boise State in a little bit different light. And so he's the first one that kind of sticks out to me. All right, defensive back Jalen Davies is another one. Okay, a guy who's got a lot of experience, time under his belt. Okay, and then their most proven wide receiver, although they may have another guy who has a higher ceiling on this roster, which we'll get to as far as breakout players here in a second, but their most proven is Logan Loya at wide receiver. And so those are the three that kind of stick out to me. What about you?
Yeah, look, you're right on track, I think, for the most part here. I think the way that you look at this with Ethan Garbers is he's going to have to be a star for this team. And so that's why he's up there with me. I think, there was definitely some yo-yoing in that lineup at quarterback. But Dante Moore is gone, right up at Oregon, getting ready to back up Dylan Gabriel up there. So this is Ethan's show. And I think he can really kind of latch on and make this team his own, now without having to look over the shoulder, have that type of uncertainty always, with a guy like Dante Moore there. So I think Ethan's going to have himself a good season, and I think he's got the star power to help UCLA. I'm going to say, a couple of guys, and he was obviously really good in the LA Bowl, as you mentioned, against Boise. So was TJ Harden, the running back, went for over 100, a couple of touchdowns. You mentioned Logan Loya. I'm with you there, but I'm going to say that J. Michael Sturdivant has the star power. I mean, anytime you can go 4 catches and about 140 receiving yards and average about 35 yards a pop, you've got star potential. And that, I'm going to say not star power, but star potential with J. Michael Sturdivant at the wide receiver spot. So that's where I went on the offensive side of the ball. Defensive side of the ball, in terms of star power, I think you're going to see it mostly at the linebacker level. Kane Madrano and here we go, Oluwafemi Oladejo is the
That's
way
how
that
I
I'm
got
going
it.
to go with that.
Yep.
There we go. So I think those guys together can become stars in the defensive side of the ball for UCLA. So that's where I had star power. So I'll get it back to you on the breakout players for UCLA.
So we're very similar. I just put J. Michael Sturdivant. I just put him as a breakout player. You had him as a star.
That's fine.
Really no difference, potato. And again, the next 2 guys on my list were the 2 linebackers from Madrano to Oladejo. So those were the next 2 guys on my list. Okay, KJ Wallace as a defensive back is another guy to keep your eye on. Jay Toye, did I say that right?
Yeah,
I got it. Toya?
Yeah.
Close.
Yeah.
Jay.
I think we're in the same.
I hope I did your name respect, my man. I mean, nothing but respect. Defensive tackle. Okay, a big body up front who can make some plays, make an impact. Okay, I forget if we said this name. You may have already said it, but KJ Wallace, defensive back. And also defensive end. Okay, Collins Achipong. Is that right? Dude, I Googled and I practiced, and I'm doing. I hope I got it somewhat right.
Yeah.
So those are the guys that stuck out to me.
Solid effort.
Yeah, I appreciate A for effort.
Solid effort.
Performance. Who do you got? Right?
Yeah. So, I am with you for the most part there. I'm going to throw one other guy out there in terms of breakout, and this is courtesy of my man Yogi Roth, who I'm going to be sharing the airwaves with this fall on our Big Ten Network crew. Myself, Yogi, and Guy Haberman are going to be traveling around Big Ten country. We actually, we were all out at USC practice yesterday, getting a chance to watch the Trojans. We're going to be at USC for their week 2 game hosting Utah State. So excited about that one. We're at Oregon to start the season. We'll be in Nebraska, as you and I have talked about, week 3 for that Northern Iowa game. But they were at, and I didn't get a chance to go, but they were at UCLA yesterday. And the guy that came from Yogi watching practice, Moliki Matavo, the tight end, is one to watch as a breakout type of player for this UCLA offense. And it has me intrigued. I don't know a lot about him right now, but I'm going to keep an eye on him as this kind of fall camp goes forward and as the early part of the season unfolds for UCLA. Yogi's got a great eye for talent. Appreciate the shout out there, giving us an additional breakout player to look for there at UCLA. And so with that, I'll jump right into biggest question mark. And to me, this is not a position group. This is not a player, Adam. This is kind of a program philosophy. What is this team going to look like with a first-year head coach, a first-time head coach in Deshaun Foster, right? A UCLA legend, right? We love that, in a lot of ways pulls at our heartstrings when you get a player, who was a star on the field to come back and try to bring stars back to the program from the sidelines as a coach. How does Deshaun Foster make his mark on this program? What is this program with Deshaun Foster leading the way? Like, there's so much that I really want to see and kind of wrap my head around with how he runs this team, how he delegates, how he motivates this team, how they play for him. And so that's my biggest question mark when it comes to the UCLA Bruins. How do you see it?
I basically have the same thing. I just said head coach Deshaun Foster. I mean, it's going to be most people's biggest question mark. A guy, as you point out, never been a head coach, never been a coordinator before, never called plays in a game. Now, when you got a guy like Eric Bieniemy, on your offensive staff, you're going to be all right. I don't want to throw this out there, but you could argue maybe in some people's eyes more qualified to be a head coach, but that's a topic for another day. I do know that Deshaun won an award actually for the amount of film study when he was with the Panthers, which is something I'd actually never heard of a team giving out an award for amount of film studied. But I know that he got one of those awards while he was with the Panthers. As you mentioned, not great at Big Ten media days, but my big question, because how prepared are you going to be for something you've never done before? Are you an individual who's going to show up and just build the plane as you're flying it? Okay, because there's not a whole lot of time for that with Power really 2 SEC and Big Ten, but Power 4 conference coaches anymore. The runway is very, very short nowadays. And so for me, are you going to come very, very prepared? He obviously showed up to Big Ten media days and was not prepared for what to say at all. So is that something he learns from and immediately gets better on? Or is that kind of how he's going to do? Is he going to build a plane while he's flying it? Because that first plane didn't go so great, but we all learn, we all make mistakes, get better. As you mentioned, UCLA legend. He's going to walk into any recruit's house, especially in California, and have instant credibility. He's going to have credibility, relatability, a lot of things. Okay. And from what I'm hearing, he's already recruiting really, really well there at UCLA, a team that actually has a decent amount of talent. It's not like the cupboard is completely bare there at UCLA. But my biggest question mark, much like yours, is head coach Deshaun Foster. And I'm curious, are you going to build the plane while you're flying it, or how prepared are you going to come to fly this bad boy as you're taking off initially? All right, so let's head to most intriguing matchup. Who do you got
on the schedule? So this UCLA Bruins team opens up with Hawaii, right? Week 1 of the season. They got to go to Hawaii. All right. So there's, again, all right, what's your road process, right? How are you getting everybody, that is a long trip, right? That's a 6-hour flight out, even from UCLA, that is a long trip out to Hawaii. How are you getting everybody ready for that trip and understanding, business trip first, right? It's always about winning the game. Look, UCLA's been there, done that. They've done that before. Say the first time they've gone out to Hawaii. So you've got that going on. So I truly believe that the most intriguing matchup is going to be week 3, and it's against my alma mater at Indiana. It is the first game of the new Big Ten, right? It's your first opportunity to plant a flag in this conference. You got it at home. It's your first home game. You're coming off a bye week. How did you use that bye week to your advantage? How did you take, what happened there? Whatever ends up happening against Hawaii week 1, how does that set you up to self-scout, to get better and use that bye week for good going into an Indiana game with the LSU game lurking the next week. I think we learn a lot about Deshaun Foster in these first 4 weeks, right? How he wants to strategize with this program, how he wants to use this program's time. So I truly think that Indiana game represents a huge opportunity, a lot of intrigue. I also think that they're kind of Indiana and UCLA are very close in my mind in terms of tiers when it comes to the Big Ten. I think they're actually in the same tier.
Yep.
I think they're right there in that middle tier as teams that are going to be fighting for, 6 to 8 wins this year. And so I think that's going to be a pretty evenly matched game. And it's going to be a real opportunity to see who's got upward mobility in this conference very early. So I like the Indiana game as the most intriguing one. And then I'll throw another one in down the road, but I want to give you an opportunity here to throw yours out.
You know what's interesting is I just about put Indiana, but I'm like, I better have at least one, if not two backups in case Rhett puts Indiana.
Yeah.
I nodded my head when you said they're in the same tier, Indiana and UCLA, because I agree. I actually think this is an intriguing matchup for both teams. Indiana, go out to Pasadena, the Rose Bowl, and you get a win on the road at UCLA, that can help get you momentum for the season. Likewise, if you're UCLA, you lose to Indiana early on, that could cause some issues going into some big games that are coming up next. If you get that win, at least you got your first ever Big Ten W on the board. So there's something to be said for that. That is actually an intriguing game because you do have me genuinely optimistic about Indiana now this year. Okay. And so I'm intrigued by that matchup as well. Dude, you're right. There's a lot of things to be interested in when it comes to Indiana football. I'm going to go to USC. And I'm not going to lie to you. How often do you get a new coaching job and you don't even have to move from your house? The whole D coordinator thing is just so intriguing to me. And maybe I'm the only person on planet Earth who cares. I don't know. There's also the USC-UCLA rivalry. They both went to the Big Ten together, et cetera, et cetera. That to me is just the most intriguing matchup on the schedule. I mean, there's some other matchups that they've got that could be very intriguing. Again, LSU, Oregon, Penn State. Yeah. The other one that actually kind of stood out to me was Nebraska. And it's because that's a point in the season where UCLA could be fighting to be bowl eligible. Nebraska could be in that same wavelength, fighting to be bowl eligible. Or there's a world where Nebraska might be 7 or 8-1 at that point. And all of a sudden going to Lincoln, Nebraska for their first time ever could be a very intriguing matchup. But I'm going to go with USC just because it's the rivalry. And we just took your D coordinator thing, which just makes it all that much more intriguing to me. But you had another one on your mind. What was the other game for you?
Well, and it's kind of a section of the schedule, right? Once you get past LSU, I mean, you've got a pretty tough 2-game stretch back to back. You've got home versus Oregon, who, again, number 3 team in the country on the first AP poll, and then you got to go cross country to Happy Valley.
It's gonna be tough.
Take on Penn State.
Yep.
First Saturday in October at Penn State. All right, so look, Penn State and Oregon are going to be heavy favorites in those games. Heavy favorites in those games. Those are going to be tough matchups for UCLA. But again, this is how we kind of continue to relate back to that biggest question mark, which is how Deshaun Foster runs this program. All right, let's say you lose those 2 games. Let's say you lose to Oregon and you lose to Penn State. I view the next 2 games, October 12th, home against Minnesota, October 19th, again, cross-country at Rutgers, as games you should be in, you should be very competitive in, and you should have a chance to win the game in the fourth quarter. Now, how do they respond if you lose to Oregon and Penn State? Do they come out with renewed focus, renewed resolve against Minnesota and Rutgers and find a way to bounce back and maybe kickstart a season that, could end up, again, with a nice bowl game at the end? Or do you start to go into the tank, right? Those Oregon, Penn State games don't go the way you want. And then, depending on how LSU went the week before, you could be talking about a 3-game losing streak right there. And if you didn't beat Indiana, now are the wheels really starting to fall off? Or can you recalibrate, refocus, and get out there and compete? And maybe you win those 2 games against Minnesota and Rutgers. You can go into your bye week, and now you're flying high again. And you've got opportunities to get to bowl eligibility there. So I really view that and that 2-week stretch against Minnesota and Rutgers as a huge, huge tipping point for the season for UCLA. It just so happens it comes basically in the middle of the season anyway. So that's kind of what I viewed. Does that make sense to you?
Dude, I'm looking at my notes. I said there is a world where UCLA could start 1-4 and then going right into Minnesota and Rutgers.
Yeah.
And then I wrote, as I kept looking at the schedule, there's a world where UCLA, if the wheels fall off, could start 1-10. Like that's legit in my notes.
Yes.
So when we start talking about high, low, and then my final prediction, dude, I'm completely 100% with you. What you just said makes so much sense. Those Minnesota and that Rutgers game. So, dude, they got to go to Penn State, come all the way home. Then eventually they got to go to Piscataway, come all the way home. And then you've got Oregon, and then you got all these other teams. Penn State's pretty freaking good in their own right. Then you got USC down the road. They were not kind to Deshaun Foster in year one of his coaching tenure.
Yeah. All right. With that, let's get to the high lows for both of these teams, right? USC and UCLA. Look, we're talking UCLA right now. Let's just continue that conversation. We'll finish with USC. So UCLA running the high low at the high point. How many wins do you think this team could get?
The highest I have here is 7-5. And obviously any team could go 12-0. You never know what could happen. But realistically, the highest I have is 7-5. And you know, my low, I'm going to pull up the schedule here. And we talked about it. They got to go all the way to Honolulu, Hawaii as well. So even some of these games that aren't supposed to be as tough of opponents, it's like they just found a way, and this is partially on UCLA's fault for scheduling this, but they just found a way to make them tougher, even if they weren't supposed to be as tough. So my high is 7-5, my low, and I'll just kind of go through it real quick. All right, let's say they beat Hawaii. Indiana just might come in there and win. I do not like early bye weeks in college football season.
That's tough.
I don't like that they have a bye week right before this. So Indiana's got a couple of games under their belt while you've got one and you're sitting at home on your rear. So to me, that's actually advantage Indiana. Right. So let's just say, okay, this is the low end. They lose to Indiana, lose to LSU, lose to Oregon, lose to Penn State, which is all possible. I mean, there's 3 teams that are in the top 10, top 15 right there. Minnesota's not going to be easy. I just talked about Rutgers might finish in the top 25 potentially. You know, you got Nebraska. If Nebraska is at home, they're rolling. That's going to be a tough one. Iowa may not score any points, but they do play defense, special teams. They won't beat themselves. I do think the Huskies are another team joining the new Big Ten that are going to have a rough season, but at least it's at Washington. If you're a Huskies fan, it's in Husky Stadium. Then you got USC, who right now would be an absolute favorite. And then you got Fresno. So my low, assuming they beat Hawaii and Fresno, is 2-10.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm kind of with you. I think the way that I work this, if things go really well for UCLA, I could see them getting 8, right? Hawaii, Indiana, Minnesota, Rutgers is 4. Let's say Nebraska 5, Washington 6, Fresno State 7, and then UCLA, USC. It's one of those rivalry games. Let's say they come out and get the dub at the Rose Bowl against USC. That gives it 8. I think that's best case scenario at this point right now. Worst case scenario, I'm pretty close to where you're at. Beat Hawaii. I don't think Fresno State's a pushover now.
Like, I don't either. I don't.
Yeah. I really don't. I mean, it's not a given, but you'd like to think that UCLA at home, you know, last game of the season can find a way to win that game. So I'll say that's 2. And then I'll say they find a way to win somewhere else. So I'll give them 3 for a worst case scenario. Upset somebody, find a way, turn it, whatever. If things aren't going well, they still find a way to win 3 games. So 3-8 is kind of the range that I've got there. But I think ultimately truth lies in the middle. I'd say this team is fighting for bowl eligibility here one way or another this season.
Do you have them in a bowl? Like, what's your final record prediction?
I think I could get them to 6. I think I could get them to 6. Okay. Yeah.
I have them at 5 and 7. So they can go ahead and start booing me, but that's where I ended up when I did mine. What are your thoughts on UCLA, high, low, and all that?
Yeah. So for USC, I will say, you know, as I was going through this thing, I truly believe, you know, this team's going to get to 6 and beyond, you know, I think pretty handily. Utah State to me is a dub. I think Wisconsin can be a dub. I'm talking about ones that I feel pretty good about. Wisconsin, Minnesota, at Maryland, at Washington, at UCLA. I think they view that as that's a game they should win, obviously. I'm going to say that the high point to me, though, for USC, I'll say it's going to be, I think it's 10. I think the high point for USC is 10 wins right here. And then at the low point, I think we're talking, things don't go the way they want. Maybe the quarterback, maybe you're yo-yoing at quarterback a little bit. If Miller Moss, can't find the consistency, I think you're talking about 7. So I'm saying between 7 and 10 is the high low for me on USC. How do you see it?
I have USC's high at 10-2 as well. They absolutely could be a playoff team, 1,000%.
Yes.
I do have the low a little bit lower just because I do find them to be one of the more unpredictable teams. I don't really know what to make of them at this point. So I do have the low end at 6-6. With my final record prediction, I actually do have them starting 1-2. Okay. Losing to LSU and Michigan, although that Michigan game, that's like we talked about earlier, that's a game.
I think it's even.
Oh, man. I just went with Michigan because it's at Michigan more so than anything, but that's a game that could honestly go either way. And then you've got Wisconsin, Minnesota, Penn State. Okay. So I've got them about 3-3 right out the gate, but then I have them beating Maryland, Rutgers, let's see, Washington, Nebraska, UCLA, Notre Dame is the final schedule. So I feel really good about Washington, UCLA, Maryland, Rutgers, Nebraska are question marks. Notre Dame probably give the slight edge to Notre Dame. So I've got them as a final record prediction right in that 8-4, 9-3 range. I landed on 8-4 just because I don't really know what to make of this team yet, but I got them at 8-4.
Yeah, I'm going to say that they do end up getting the 9. I feel more comfortable with that prediction here. And in that case, I think you're probably just missing out on the playoffs, but I think that could go either way. And you could find them in there, in that 10-12 range when things are all said and done. So there we go, man. USC, UCLA Summer Series previews done. We've had an opportunity to do kind of the traditional powerhouses in the Big Ten. We still got to get to Penn State. We'll get there. We got to get to Oregon. We'll certainly get there, Oregon and Washington. But if you missed any of those Summer Series previews, they are out now. We've done Ohio State and Michigan. We've done our alma maters, Indiana, Nebraska. Now USC and UCLA are done. We've got a few more to get to here before the season starts, but be sure to check that previous episode content. And then, of course, just one more plug to get out there on the YouTube page, the Bleav Network YouTube page. Comment down there any questions you have for us. We're going to try to get into that comment section and answer some of those questions for you, and then maybe bring some of those onto a future show just to continue to engage everybody. So big shout out to Big Ten Radio. Look forward to being there on channel 372 on Sirius XM moving forward here this fall. A lot of fun stuff, Adam, still on the way here as we get closer and closer to week 1, man.
I'm actually gonna throw a question out there to the fine folks. It's a 2-part question. Number 1, does UCLA make a bowl game? Okay, you can just say yes or no, or you can go into any length of description you like. And does USC make the college football playoff? Same thing, yes or no, or you can give us a lengthy
great
answer.
Questions.
Let us know in the comments below.
All right, my man. This has been fun. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys next week here on Bleav in Big Ten.
See you next time.